Alright, so Mech just announced a bunch of rebalances for certain weapons, so let's go over those. Now obviously I want to be totally fair about all of this, I've already read them. Okay, so Cryo Launcher, damage increased by like 12.6%. I already did the math on these. Which is, roughly 1/8. So if you're using a 16, then it's going to feel like an 18, which is interesting. So yeah, written not super large, but the Cryo Launcher as well as the Nade Launcher got the same percentage buff. I think it's relatively based, especially the Cryo Launcher. It doesn't really perform that well, especially against players or even bots, honestly. I would say personally that it's sort of a mid weapon. It is epic, so clearly, endgame it's not supposed to be fantastic, but I think if you're going to have rocket mortars, which are rare and perform like 3 times better, then yeah. And then there's also Helix, right? That's not even considering Helix. So I think that's based. Miniguns damage will be increased by 6.2%, roughly a 16th, which means roughly a half of what Cryo and Nades are buffed by. Necessary? I don't think so. Minigun is already an incredibly effective weapon. I would say that it saw a little bit less usage simply because it's a sustained fire weapon and there's inherent downsides to those that you really can't fix, even if you tried. But I do appreciate them trying, I suppose. And it's a very small buff. So if it was like 10%, I'd be like, nah, I'd actually legitimately be against it, even though minigun's my favorite weapon. I'd be legitimately against it because it already performs fine. Chain gun. 20% damage buff across the board. Very much needed. I think chain gun is the worst investment you can make currently because you can't even buy them for A coins. You gotta get them for freaking offers. And when you do, the return for your investment is so bad. It's so bad. So absolutely, probably the best buff that they could have made. So that's good. That's good. Yeah. I think once again, it's a sustained fire weapon, and the mechanics are just not the best, to a point where probably it would need something besides just flat damage buff. That is what most sustained weapons need, is something a little bit besides just a flat damage buff, because otherwise, like, it's yeah. Damage cannot solve every problem. Okay, so the ones that everybody's here for, right? Arc Torrents. Fairly massive nerf. Optimal range will increase for all variants from 2 30 meters. So essentially, instead of at like rank 1, I think it starts at 0 to 15, which, unless you're buying an offer, it's not going to happen. Then it's just flat. There's no more ranking it up to get more range, right? It will be possible to increase max range with implants, but there will be damage fall off beyond optimal range. Now, those who didn't know, which probably everybody knows, Arc Torrent did not, or does not currently, have damage fall off. It was one of the, I think it was the only close quarters weapon to not have damage fall off. So the optimal range will be like 0 to 30. The max range will probably be like 40 is the max range. And then you can increase that range with implants. But now it's just going to have damage fall off over optimal range, right? That makes sense. On top of that, there is an Arc Torrent damage nerf. It's by a sixth, 16.7%. So essentially, your 12s are going to hit like 10s. Is this necessary? Like, both of those were not necessary. You could do one or you could do the other. It'd be fine. I do agree that Arc Torrent's a little bit strong for what it is, but you know, so is Helix Rank, so is so is Ember Gun. Ember Gun was better than Arc Torrent before this ever happened, so yeah. So is it good? Is it bad? I'd say it's mid. I'm not opposed to it, but I think there's other things that they could have done instead. Disc Launcher. Now this is the one everybody's gonna love. Damage beyond optimal range will be decreased. So 0 to 60, still going to do full damage. They're not changing any of the damage numbers per magazine or anything. But once you're outside of optimal range, you're going to do less damage, right? Okay, fair enough. Splash damage will be reduced the further enemies are from its point of impact, which means there will be a damage fall off for the radius, which is something I've been telling them that they need for so long. What I wanted was for this to apply to every weapon. I think a universal, game-wide damage fall-off for radius would be phenomenal, because that keeps all radius weapons from being absolutely, like, catastrophic, because, you know, then the further away someone is, the less damage they take. And that's just, you know, makes sense. But this seems to just be for Disc Launcher. It was something that I determined a long time ago that, in my opinion, would be the best way to balance Disc Launcher specifically, but also Rocket Mortar. And yeah, so I don't dislike that. I will be honest. And splash damage will no longer be able to deal increased damage to the sides and rears of mechs. So they're removing back damage multipliers from the radius of Disc Launchers specifically. Which again, that's really weird. I think it's very strange that they changed the way that radius works specifically for this weapon. I think that you could solve a lot of problems just with universal radius falloff. I still think that. In terms of radius dealing back damage, honestly, I could take that universally too. I think if it doesn't apply to Disc Launcher, it shouldn't apply to anything. But then, you know, you also have to consider all of the things that radius is known to counter, which, you know, the one thing that's not on here is Railgun. Railgun's like the most prominent weapon in any game mode among competitive players. And yeah, it's not here. Railgun, EM rifle, no. There's no snipers listed for rebalance, listed for nerfs. Which is very bad, because that means that the one weapon, Disc Launcher, the one weapon that could effectively counter snipers is now, let's say, balanced, because again, I don't know the severity of any of these things. Now maybe the damage fall off for the radius isn't that large. Maybe I know myself personally, I hit a lot of mechs in the front with Disc Launcher when I use them, because I use the homing. I don't even use the radius, I use the homing because it's more fun that way. And so, but I still get lots of kills with it because it's just a ridiculous weapon. It's got lots of damage. It's got you know, lots of reach. It's got the homing, and the reload time basically doesn't exist. So yeah, it's still a fantastic weapon. So arguably, until I try this, I would encourage everyone to. I am not going to formulate an opinion until I've actually tried this and figure out what the numbers are. I'm going to be testing all the numbers for anything that's been arbitrary, but I don't have the numbers yet. So yeah, I definitely want to try that though. It sounds interesting. But yeah, let's just say for the sake of argument, you know, Disc Launcher is now balanced. Disc Launcher is now on par with, let's say, Minigun, Disruptor, any of these other, like, sort of, they're these legendary weapons that are good, they're just not the best. But EM Rifle and Railgun remain the best. They are still the best, and now they go completely unchallenged. So the only way to deal with them now is going to just be, like, mortar spam, but there's been so many mortar counters lately, like Aegis, Eclipse, Sir, all of the legendary scouts, really. Plus Aegis, plus anything else you could think of, I'm sure. So ultimately, I think it's always dangerous to nerf one thing without nerfing the thing that it directly counters, especially when you're talking about the trifecta of Mech Arena meta being Disc Launcher, Railgun, EM Rifle. Those are the three most popular weapons by an extreme margin. And if you nerf one, that means that the other two have less contest. Both of them are snipers, which means that it's just, yeah, it's going to be a pretty chaotic for a long time. And I'm going to try to push them to balance out these sniper weapons at the same time. Otherwise, we're going to have basically an EM rifle situation where, like, when EM rifle was new, it was absolutely dominating everything, and you just couldn't get past it. It was no fun. The game was just incredibly boring. And yeah, that might be the situation that we're going to get. But again, kind of depends on the severity of the Disc Launcher nerf. But even still, it is a nerf, right? So it's going to be, the sniper meta is going to be more prominent, period. There's no getting around that. It's just a matter of how bad it is, how bad it gets. And yeah, thankfully, there's more relevant close quarters weapons and close quarters mechs than there were back when EM Rifle was new and it was dominating everything. We now have Nomad, we now have Vortex, we now have Ember Guns. Ember Guns are great. We now have Seeker, which, people are just going to use. they'll use Railgun now, let's be honest. But, so those are nice. Those are sort of anti-sniper mechs and weapons. So, will it be better than the EM Rifle fiasco, over a year ago? Hopefully. I can't really guarantee that it will. Probably will. But it will definitely not be the best for a little while. For someone especially like me who does not enjoy sniper metas, I don't really enjoy having, a one-shot weapon in a mech game be the only viable strategy. That's not a strategy, that's just who gets the shot off first. So yeah, that is just my take. I think a lot of this is good. A lot of the rebalance is based on solid perspective. I would agree with all of it, honestly. Especially the chain gun. The minigun is questionable. The arc torrent, I don't know. Some of them, they could have rebalanced a little too far, but I think there's also a bit of nuance in terms of how far they're going to balance it, right? Because they just say that there's going to be radius fall off. They just say that there is going to be damage fall off above optimal range for arc torrent. They don't say how much. They don't say how severe that's going to be. So, arguably it might not be bad at all, and it might be the balance that, we need. But I do definitely believe that if they're going to balance, particularly Disc Launcher, they really, really need to balance the snipers that they counter and keep us from having just an awful time with zero ways of dealing with these already hyper-prominent weapons. Apart from that, two other notes. The PvE is going to be released soon for everybody, the new season, the new campaign, which, hooray, I don't think anybody really cares about, I'll be honest. Because, yeah, it's probably going to force you to buy something that you don't want. It's going to be for one of the legendary attacker mechs, which is interesting. I don't know which one it is. I hope it's Gatecrasher, though, because a fancy-looking skin and or possibly ability could be very dope for that guy. And then there's going to be modifiers, including one to increase the chance for legendary implants, but let's be honest, it's pointless. It's pointless. It increases it from 0.1% to 0.2%. It's not a big deal. I can guarantee you right now it's never worth investing in them. So, yeah. Neither of those are very important, but they're not gonna hurt, right? They can't hurt you just because they don't benefit you as much as you'd like for them. It doesn't mean they're gonna hurt you. But, yeah. That will be it for the updates. Let me know what your thoughts on these are. I think we got the makings of something good, but I'm not sure if we're quite there yet. I think they got some work to do. But otherwise, yeah, that'll be it for me. Appreciate y'all. Take care.